All set. Thank you guys for coming to the class, and Liz, you can just take it.
All right. Thank you so much to Charissa, and thank you so much to the Hoboken Library for allowing us to have these classes. Art at home is so essential during our time of pandemic. There have been pluses and minuses to doing art at home, but I'm hoping at this point more pluses than minuses. Again, thank you to the Hoboken Public Library. In August, we have been focusing primarily on artists who love the out of doors and who have been doing painting on plein air, because August is the time of vacation traditionally for people in the United States. And interestingly, the French usually take an entire month off in August, and most of the artists we've been looking at have been French or have spent a lot of time in France, including the artists we are going to focus on today, named Vincent Van Gogh. And let me just first scroll through the attendees to see if we have any new members. It does not appear to be the case. So welcome to all of you folks, my veteran students. I'm thrilled that you're back with us today. What to say about Vincent Van Gogh? He is certainly a well-known artist. In fact, in New York at the moment, there is this immersive
exhibit.
Yes, how does one quite describe this kind of 3D virtual reality extravaganza about Vincent Van Gogh that I know many of you have been to? And I'm guessing at this point, you probably even know more about Van Gogh than I do. There are thousands of books that have been written about him, pages and pages of information that you can find on the internet, including Wikipedia. That really is a pretty good source of information, biographical information about Vincent Van Gogh. There is soon to come out a book about Johanna Van Gaack, who was Van Gogh's sister-in-law, and to whom Vincent posthumously owes a great deal. Without Johanna Van Gaack, his brother Theo's wife, Vincent probably would have vanished into obscurity. She really single-handedly did the most to make Vincent Van Gogh the enormous artist that he is today. And I'm looking forward to reading this book because, I mean, kudos to her. She, after Van Gogh died, and Theo had died before Johanna did, Johanna devoted her life to putting Van Gogh into a status of genius artist, and she should be lauded for that. So I'm glad this book has been written. Van Gogh was born March 1853 and died quite tragically in 1890 on July 29th. So he was quite young at his death. Let me just see if I can double check his exact age. I don't want to get it wrong. He was only 37. He died at his own hand. It is believed he shot himself. And I mean, what can we say? He was a troubled artist. He had deep psychological problems. He was Dutch. That isn't why he was fraught with these emotional and psychological problems, but he grew up in an upper middle class family. He came from a long line of art dealers and artists. So art was something he knew about and was surrounded by his entire childhood. His mother was a powerful force in his life, and she was quite an austere individual. And I've read several times, I've read her described as kind of a claustrophobic individual. So she might have contributed to his deep psychological problems. Who knows? She was so family oriented that she had a very tight grip on all of her family members, but it seems most especially on Vincent. And appearance and keeping up was extremely important to Van Gogh's mother. He was a very thoughtful, quiet, serious young man. He worked as an art dealer. He worked in the family business. He often traveled for the business, and he was transferred to London at a young age, where he worked as an art dealer. In London, he first showed serious signs of depression, and he turned to religion and became very, very deeply involved in his Protestant faith, almost to the point of obsession, and declared that he wanted to become a Protestant missionary. He pursued a desire to become a theologian, tried to go to school to become a minister. That didn't really work out. He became a missionary in Holland, was not very successful at it because he started taking this extreme vow of poverty. He moved out of his home so that homeless people could move into his home. And his parishioners really, instead of looking up to him for that, as he thought they would, they shunned him for that. And he persisted, though. He really, really tried to live this life of Christian charity and follow in the footsteps of Christ, but it all really didn't work out well for him. He moved back to live with his family. Excuse me 1 minute. There's a student texting me.
Someone's probably just messaging you about the link, but I'm trying to handle that on this end, but you're not receiving links. I'm getting phone calls. So just proceed with the class and I'll handle all the traffic.
Thank you, Sharissa.
Yeah.
I'm letting her know. So the missionary life really didn't work out for him. So he came back home. He started pursuing the art life in more depth. He met several artists during that period of time who turned him on to the use of watercolor and oil paint. One artist in particular was a cousin, last name of Mauve, interestingly enough, who was the person who turned him on to oil paints. He studied on and off at the Academy of Arts in Holland, where he learned anatomy and drawing skills. He did not like academic training and often ran into trouble with his teachers and frequently rebelled against the strict academic training that he was subjected to there. Rumor has it that he was expelled from the academy, but that in fact was probably untrue. He was asked at one point to repeat a year, and it's not clear whether he actually did that. He probably did not. In 1886, he moved to Paris, where he met members of the avant-garde, including Émile Bernard and Paul Gauguin. He loved these artists. He loved the fact that they were rebelling against the artists that we've been looking at for the last several weeks, the Impressionists. And he too was really kind of fighting against the sensibility of the Impressionists, the very pretty pastel colors that they were using. They were not to Van Gogh's taste. He had a darker palette, which probably suited his more deep, dark psychological mood that he was living with in his own life. His emotional problems persisted. He was having difficulties in all personal relationships with men and women. He was an extremely lonely man. He frequently fled back to live with his parents because of his extreme loneliness. He could not bear being alone and struggled throughout his life interacting with other people. He was a passionate person and had difficulty controlling his emotions, and probably a lot of these deep feelings were what made it difficult for him to connect with others. I'm not a psychologist, but you know, these are the ideas about him that I've gleaned over the years from reading that I've done about him. So while in Paris, he started developing a style of his own. He created a whole new approach to still lifes and local landscapes. His paintings grew brighter, more colorful. Even though he had these occasional dark moods, he was starting to incorporate brighter colors into his work. He was suffering physically. His brother Theo, who was a successful art dealer, was frequently sending him money, but Van Gogh had become so committed to his own painting and expressing his own artistic voice that he was using that money for art supplies and neglecting his own physical needs and not buying food for himself. So he was starting to suffer physically from deprivation from food. He didn't even hydrate all that much. He subsisted primarily on coffee and cigarettes. He frequently self-medicated with drink. He was a heavy drinker. He had terrible relationships with women, and it was known that he became infected with syphilis and gonorrhea during his lifetime. So he had all kinds of physical problems during his very short life. All right, he suffered from psychotic episodes and delusions. He did worry about his mental stability, but he did nothing to help himself, neither physically or emotionally. All right, in 1888, he'd had it with life in Paris. He was completely exhausted. He was working himself to death. I should add that he was one of the most prolific artists of all time, maybe before and after his death. He had made, at that point in 2 years, over 200 paintings, God knows how many drawings, and he was worn out and exhausted. So in 1888, he moved to the town of Arles in the south of France. And he had hoped, it was his dream in Arles to start an artist colony. So he started inviting artists there, one of whom was his new friend, Paul Gauguin. And he pestered Gauguin and pestered him and pestered him. And Gauguin kept refusing to come, but then Theo Van Gogh's brother, gave Gauguin money to go. So Gauguin went. They had a period of time together, Vincent and Paul, a period of time together that was quite creative, where they painted side by side, and they did some brilliant work in that collaborative period. And they had wonderful conversations about art, and things were going really well. Unfortunately, Vincent had quite an obsessive relationship with Paul, similar to other relationships with people that Vincent felt close to. And Gauguin couldn't deal with it finally and said to Vincent, "I'm done. I'm leaving. I've had it. I have to get out of here." Vincent went crazy, threatened Gauguin with a razor, decided not to hurt Gauguin, decided to inflict the pain upon himself. As is famously now known, Vincent sliced off his ear, took it to a prostitute as a tribute, tried to offer it to her, and she refused him. He was then put into an asylum where he actually got better. He was doing quite well. And after his recovery, started painting again, but unfortunately, a few months later, the depression hit him again, and he committed suicide. So that is the short and painful life of Vincent Van Gogh. The good news is, as I said, he did a lot of painting in those years, even amongst the vilification. He was vilified by the art world for the most part. He was shown in a few places. He exhibited in a few art shows. He never achieved success in his lifetime. He never sold anything in his lifetime, even though his brother loved him deeply. Vincent often excoriated his brother for not working hard enough to sell his work. Theo persisted in trying, and Theo did take care of Theo right up to the moment of his death, supported him in any way that he could. And in the end, they did reconcile. So bittersweet as the end was for Vincent, they did come together. Anybody have information that they want to add? One of the things that I find most tragic about Vincent Van Gogh, although it is what now makes him one of the highest paid artists on the planet, is how stereotyped his life has become, and how artists of my generation, I don't think artists today feel this way, but artists of my generation actually believed that we had to have tortured souls and we had to live in poverty in order to achieve success. And of course, we know that's not true. But I think that's one of the sadder aspects of his life, is that we're left with this stereotypical idea of the insane artist as the artist who really is the only true artist. It really clouds, one second. It really clouds our whole ability to see the extraordinary skill and genius of his work. He was, I believe, crazy, but that does not inhibit his ability to create gorgeous artwork. All right, sorry, who was trying to say something?
Oh, hi, Liz, it's Teresa. Joining you late, I just got my link, but so I don't know, did you mention that the book by John Irving, The Lust for Life?
I did not, but it's
autobiographical fiction, but it's a fabulous book from the details of his life, if anybody wants to really engage in being him.
Yes, I did not mention that book, and that, of course, is the book that the first movie, or the first Hollywood movie about Vincent Van Gogh was based on, starring, help me out here,
Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas, thank you. Which I, of course, watched repeatedly as a kid.
Yeah, it's a great, how much is fictionalized, I don't know, but
I think
a lot of research went into it, as Irving Stone mentions in the end. And it is just very engaging.
I think John Irving took a lot of liberties. Like
Hello.
Van Gogh's letters.
And it's Irving Stone, I'm sorry, the author.
Yes. Karen, you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, I missed the beginning of, I didn't get a link either. I went to last week's link and it let me in.
Oh, that works. I didn't know that.
I just took a shot at it, but so I missed the beginning. He's my favorite painter also. And
Wonderful.
Did you talk about his letters at all?
I did not, but there are many, many letters that Vincent wrote to Theo and to other people. That
There are volumes of his letters.
Volumes and volumes of his.
And they're really incredible. I certainly haven't read all of them, but I've read a lot of them. Actually, there's a book that consolidates his letters about art, and I wish I could remember the name of the man who put it together, the writer. Auden?
Listen, Karen, I wouldn't worry about it, but people can Google Van Gogh's letters.
Yes, they're amazing.
You will find the link. But I did talk about, here's the book I want you to look for. There is a biography out, just written, of Johanna Van Gaack, Theo's wife, that talks about her contribution to making Vincent Van Gogh the icon that he is today. And I read the review of it in the New York Times book review section. And she is probably the single most important person in the, I don't know how else to put it, but the deification of Vincent Van Gogh. She single-handedly made Vincent Van Gogh the famous artist that he is today. Without Johanna Van Gaack, he would have fallen into complete obscurity. So I really recommend that biography. Those of you who love Vincent Van Gogh, that is the next book that I think you should read. And I believe it has just been published.
Oh, thank you, Liz.
Do you know the title?
What, Margot? I think that was Margot.
Yes. Do you know the title? Is it the biography of
I
Johanna
don't
Van
know the title, but I bet if you Google biography of Johanna, Johanna Van Gogh.
I read the animated movie, which was fantastic. Loving Vincent. It's
Yes,
right through.
oh gosh, yes.
Johanna comes there in a very positive light also. Like
Yes.
the brother and her really helping him so much.
Well, Johanna was a widow for many, many, many years. And she, through her own strength of will, think about this. She was a lone woman in a period of time when women were discouraged from going into business. And she was a mother as well. I forget how many kids she had, but she, on her own, made Vincent Van Gogh an extraordinarily famous artist. So I just kudos to her.
Liz, did you talk about the Immersion exhibit?
I did, and I think it's closing soon. I have not gone. I had the opportunity to go and I slept through it. I completely forgot.
I went twice. It wasn't worth going twice, but
Well,
what you wanted to go.
here's my confession. I love Van Gogh so much. I've been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam 3 times.
Oh, my.
So I figured the Immersion Museum I could miss, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're not. I don't think. I think it was an entertaining experience. It was not an artistic experience.
Oh, okay. So I don't feel so bad now.
No.
But let's look at his work. Time is way. See, now this is the thing with Van Gogh that drives me crazy. People love talking about him, and then they forget to look at his work. So let's look at his work, please, because it is extraordinary. The other important thing about Van Gogh is how important his work is to the artists who followed him. This is another thing we have to really thank Johanna Van Gaack for. All right, can folks see this image? Can you see this picture? I feel like
I see your,
You see a
Screen above.
gallery, Liz.
yeah.
yeah, I think I did it in the wrong order. So let's try this again. I was so excited. No, I did it wrong again. What am I doing wrong? Try this. Share screen. Ah, here we go. How's this?
Yeah.
Ah. No, sorry, give me another minute. I can't get my toolbar to go away. Urgh. I'm trying to enlarge the image. Oh, here we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Ah, finally, thank goodness. Okay, so this is Van Gogh's room in the Yellow House in Arles, one of my favorite Van Goghs. And you notice the different ways I'm pronouncing his name. The correct pronunciation, from my understanding, the Dutch pronunciation is very guttural. You pronounce the GH at the end of his name, Gach, way back in the back of your throat. It's easier. The English pronunciation is Van Gogh. So either way is acceptable. I love this painting primarily because of the color. The color is just breathtakingly beautiful. Do keep in mind that this is digitized, so it's not the true color, but it comes close. In the real painting, the color is incredibly saturated and intense. The blue shimmers when you look at this painting. Look at the textural effects. You can virtually see each brush stroke. He also used a knife. This is an oil painting. He loved to put it on thick and fast. He often scraped away. He commented the first time he used oils, he put it on so heavily that he ended up scraping half of it away. And he was in love with the effect of the scraping. He was just so enamored with that. Notice the dark outlines. In this image, the outlines look black, but if you go to the Van Gogh Museum, the thing that always hits me first is the color of the outlines. They are the deep ultramarine royal blue, the most extraordinary color of, like, if you're looking at an iris, the flower iris, it's like the deepest blue on the edge of the petal of an iris. So think color when you're inspired by Van Gogh. He did love perspective. He often, when he did his landscapes, he created a grid-like format because he liked looking at how lines converge back into space. We've been talking about that a lot in our landscape work in the last few weeks. This is obviously an internal landscape. Look at the way the angles, they're not really true to reality in this image. Van Gogh was all about emotion. Remember, we talked about his passion, he had this eruptive, fiery personality, and it erupted on the canvas. His emotions were always close to the surface, and he tried to express them through his art. But the perspective is inaccurate. You look at this picture drawing on the wall here, the angles are all wrong. And yet sometimes the perspective is perfect. The edges of the bed, the way they angle correctly back towards our horizon line is here at the bottom of the wall. The perspective is perfect on the rungs in the chair. So he would use it when he felt like it, but sometimes he would just abandon it depending on his mood. Interesting to notice how neat he kept his room. I think there was a bit of obsessive compulsive. Oh, there's a lot in the chat box. Give me a second, well, never mind. Let's look at these pictures first. He went through a period where the mauves, the ultramarines, and yellows were his favorite colors.
Those are good colors.
Yes. Let's look at one of his self-portraits. Again, if you go to the Van Gogh Museum, there is a preponderance of self-portraits. He had a habit of alienating his models or forcing himself upon his models and then being deprived of models because of his behavior. So he did a lot of self-portraits, because frequently he was his only available model. Again, the outlining appears to be black, but it is in reality blue, a very powerful blue. Notice all the textural effect. He was, near the end of his life, he briefly met the pointillist artists and was influenced by their whole philosophy of doing the tiny dots of color. Remember, we've talked about how they were trying to create the optical illusion of blended color by laying dots in the same family of colors close together, so that when you observe them from a distance, they blended together to look like one solid color. And he did that, but not with dots. He would do that with splatted on brush strokes or with the knife. The intensity, look at the expression in his eyes. It's just kind of wounded, wouldn't you say? I love the flowing quality of his hair mirrored in this wavy effect in the background. Just really.
I was just gonna say the same. I love the textures.
Yeah. Notice how the background, even though there's nothing there, he's made it a living part of the portrait he has filled it in. Why? Because the portrait would be lost in an empty white background. Always remember your background, my artists. Always. Fill it in, or the objects that you're painting, the portrait or the figure that you're painting, becomes swallowed up in all that empty blank white space. Didn't he have the most gorgeous nose? Look at this. All right. I feel like I'm talking too much today.
No, you're not. Whatever you say is extremely interesting.
Tell that,
Second that.
tell that to my family members, please.
Oh, family members don't count.
All right, so here's another one of my favorites. So,
Similar background.
yes. So these are some boats. Not sure the location of this fabulous. I don't know, is Isle near the coast? I don't think so. I don't know where this painting was done, but look at all the motion in this piece, the way I forget what you call these, where the sails are hung from the mast, the way they're tilted in all these wonderful directions, the way the boats are slanted in different directions, the movement of the waves. The boats seem to have their own personality, like the decoration on the bowsprit looks almost like a face, doesn't it?
Mm.
So he injected his personality, his imagination, his spirit into everything that he did. And that was important to him. That was his intent. This was not something, well, it happened unintentionally, but also intentionally. He wanted to convey his love of color, his passion for the beauty of everything around him onto the canvas. And his major frustration was that he felt he wasn't doing that. He wasn't achieving that. He always felt frustrated, just the way you all do every time you put pencil to paper. He felt those same frustrations. He always fell short of his goal. But this is just, I think, genius composition. These beached boats, the way they force your eye back to the horizon, and then these boats in the water forcing your eye even further back, along with the shoreline here. He really shows the beauty of this seascape that he's looking at.
Liz, I wanted to just comment on this one, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. So I've never seen this this painting, and as you described it, it struck me that it felt like the subject, which is the sea and the boats, is being narrated by the sky, and so I was trying to wrap my mind around the textures in the background, if you will, and it feels like it's telling the story. It's like speaking the story in a way that the subject just rests in the canvas.
Very poetic as always, Jane. Thank you. Maybe it kind of looks like a storm is brewing, right? And then maybe the boats are beached because they're preparing for the oncoming storm. And then Maybe these boats are not going out to sea. Maybe they're coming in preparation to the storm. Who knows? I like that interpretation.
It almost has the effect of a tunnel.
Yes. Yep.
It kind of draws you in.
Yes. And he uses all the conventions of landscape. The larger shapes are in the foreground. See how things get smaller as they recede in space. So as much as he hated the conventions of academic art, he employed them.
Hmm.
Think about the courage it took these groundbreaking artists to break away from all that. I have many self-portraits here, but we're running out of time. So what I want us to focus on today are some of what I think are his most magnificent works, although I do think his self-portraits are, they're my favorite. But now we're going to look at what I want to be our focus today, and that is drum roll, please, his sunflowers. I had so much fun at the farmer's market yesterday choosing. I bought 3 sunflowers. I must have been channeling this painting. I realize now it only has 3 sunflowers. One of the things I love about this is sunflowers are all unique. There are different species of sunflowers. Some are dark in the middle, some are light in the middle. Some have larger centers, some have smaller.
I love how the sunflowers that he uses are not necessarily like a full brand new flower. You know, some of them are just the centers. Some of them are just, they just have a few lingering petals, but that is what gives it so much personality and so much beauty, I think. And a lot of the things were like, these are old flowers, let's get them in the bin. He just found such beauty and again, such movement and something we might quote unquote call dead. So
the withered leaves here.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
No, perfect. Yep. He found beauty everywhere.
He painted.
Go ahead, Karen.
He painted the sunflowers in Arles. That's where they were and all. And it's interesting how bright they are. He was probably very happy to be there. And when Gauguin was there, so it shows in his paintings.
Yes, initially he was ecstatic enough. He was ecstatic. It was exotic to him. He loved how the people dressed. He thought they were warm and welcoming, but of course, that deteriorated for him over time. So. Anybody else want to say more about this painting? Again, the brush strokes are visible. It's interesting though, the background of this compared to the base here is much less textured. But it is still, I mean, I know if we saw this in real time, in real life, you would be able to see more texture. Unfortunately, it's pixelated. Okay, we're gonna look at one more, and then I'm gonna give you your assignment for today. And we can have our own fun. A la Venga. Look at the variety. Love this painting. I love the way the object fills the entire page, the whole vase. Again, he's got some dead babies in here, along with some new flowers. But yes, Karen, you're right. In Al, there are fields and fields of sunflowers. They're grown commercially in that region of France. And he had a love affair with yellow, probably because of this stay in Al. So just, I want you to notice how flowers are not always circular. Notice the way this sunflower is turned, the center becomes an ellipse. You cannot see the entire circle here, okay? It's elliptoid, not spherical. And here, it's not a circle any longer because of the way it's tilted downwards. So you might want to, we are going to do sunflower paintings today, and you can look at a Van Gogh and copy it, which is what I'm going to do today. Well, I actually have real sunflowers here too, and I'm going to refer to them. Or if you're lucky enough to have actual flowers with you, you can look at a photograph of sunflowers. And I recommend that before you start your finished piece, that you just sketch circles and elliptoids. Just practice that for the first few minutes. Loosen up your hand. Try and see the way the shape changes depending on the direction the flower is turned or tilted. We tend to have a dictionary or a Pictionary in our mind of what a flower looks like, and then we draw that symbol of a flower over and over and over again. And today, your goal is to actually look at the shape of the flower you're observing, whether it's in a painting by Van Gogh, whether it's an actual flower you're lucky enough to have in front of you, whether it's a photograph of a flower. And do some pencil sketches first, and then start a larger piece. You can use watercolors, you can use acrylics. If you don't have any of that available to you, you can do pencil drawing, you can do colored pencil, you can do soft pastel or oil pastel, but I want you to focus on flowers today. And if you don't have anything available about sunflowers, please choose colorful flowers, and preferably more than one flower. Try and do 2 or 3. All right, gonna give you a couple of minutes to gather up your materials. I'm gonna get my palette ready. I'm gonna be doing an acrylic on watercolor paper. And I'm gonna keep this painting up. And oh, Steve A, are you a newcomer to our class? If you are, welcome.
I was here a couple of weeks ago, And
Okay, great. Okay.
Hmm.
Welcome
thank
back.
thank you.
I'm going to start working on my own painting. As always, I encourage you not to watch me. However, if you think it will help you, please do. Yes, there is a great article about Johanna. It's Johanna with an H. Van Gogh. I'm going to put that in the chat box. Johanna Van Gaack, who was Van Gogh's sister-in-law, in the New York Times. And the new book, I believe, has been published, in which the author talks about how she made Vincent Van Gogh famous. And she faced a lot of adversity. Many of her relatives told her to just sell all of his work in one big batch, and she resisted, and it was brilliant of her. She was one smart cookie. All right, so I'm not going to be spotlighted because I want to leave this painting by Van Gogh up for those of you who want to copy. And by the way, I repeat, there is nothing wrong with copying other artists' artwork. It is how we learn from each other. It's how Van Gogh learned. He spent a lot of time copying the old masters in museums in Paris and forgot to eat. Don't make his same mistake in that department. The other thing I invite you all to think about today is yellow. Try and mix a variety of yellows. You might want to practice doing that first. Try not to use it just straight from the bottle or the tube. Remember that the opposite of yellow on the color wheel is violet. When you're trying to get a more brown hue, mix your yellow with a little bit of violet. Don't mix it with brown. See what happens when you mix it with violet. Try something new. Experiment. Van Gogh loved experimenting, particularly with color. I don't know if you can see, but here, whoops. Here are my gorgeous sunflowers. They're big babies. They sell them every Tuesday in Hoboken at the farmer's market.
Wow, huge, gorgeous.
Yes.
Hard to pick just 3.
It was, but they're $1.50 each, so I decided 3 is plenty, right?
3 looks beautiful.
All right. So I'm going to sketch first in pencil. Again, I encourage you to get a piece of scrap paper and practice the difference between circles and ellipses. So I am going to ignore the Van Gogh painting. I'm going to look at only my sunflowers here. So it's kind of difficult because they're all the same size, all the same height. And today I am working on watercolor paper. I have one sunflower facing frontwards, the others are facing away from me. Which is really cool because I've never spent a whole lot of time looking at the back of a sunflower before. They're amazing. Oh no. Putting in the petals. Very quick sketch, very light work with my pencil. I'm holding the pencil very close to the eraser because I'm doing what's known as a gestural drawing. I don't have any control over what pencil is doing, very little control. Van Gogh really only wanted to achieve a quick impression of what he was looking at. Was not concerned with a realistic replication. Noticing how the petals overlap each other, so I'm unable to see each individual petal fully and completely, so I'm not drawing them that way. I don't know if you can hear the banging, but there's construction going on next door. Apologies for that. The back of the sunflower has all these little spiky, curly green leaves. They're so cool. I'm about ready to paint. I have to go get water. I will return in a second. Here we go. As always, I'm going to start with a thin wash of color just to lay out my composition. And as that dries, I will start adding more color. I'm going to start, I have a little bit of background, even though my flower is gigantic. I'm actually thinking that I want to put more petals. Not quite done with my drawing. About what color to make the background, don't know. Go something in a blue-gray family. It's literally a wash of color. I'm using more water than paint. I'm not worrying about making it smooth and flat, because Van Gogh certainly wouldn't have worried about that. Love that textural effect. I like to lay down the background first because it's always easier to put smaller shapes onto the larger areas. Once you have your background in place and it's had a chance to dry, it becomes easier to paint your smaller objects on top. And also in the wash, you don't have to worry if the color varies, because when you come back to do your thicker layers, you can always correct. That's your time to make corrections or additions. Another thing that I should have mentioned, a contributing factor to Van Gogh's mental illness was probably the paints that he used, because things like cadmium yellow at that period in time were toxic. So he was breathing toxic fumes from the paints that he used. And because he was such an incredibly prolific painter, that probably was a factor in his mental illness, probably affected the way his brain works. But people didn't really know and understand the hazards of those chemicals back in the day. It was really bad, you know, during earlier times. Like Vermeer probably, when artists were mixing their own pigments, it was even worse. So now I'm going to work on the petals of the sunflowers, not only because they're one of the larger shapes in my painting, but because they're one of the lighter colors. It's always easier to work on lighter shapes first. Your palette is still relatively clean and unsullied. It's always easier to start light and then add and make darker as you go. So my sunflower, the petals really aren't yellow. They have more of an orangey tinge tinge, particularly towards the center of the flower. More of an ochre color. And the closer to the center, the more orange they are. Okay, for the drips, work with that. Remember, when you're doing the wash, if the color isn't quite right, don't worry about it because you can go over it. It's just a thin wash and you can make corrections once it's dry. Wash is your time during the painting process when you can experiment and play with color. Just laying down your shapes for compositional reasons. Style may be a perfectionist one, and that's fine and good. But do remember that art is about exploring. If you create something that's perfect, it really is no longer art. Art is about the anomalies and the imperfections. It's about the expression of self and allowing your personality to come through, allowing your style to come out. Machines are designed for perfection, not human beings. That's my philosophy of art. So now I'm going to go to the next darkest area, which is green area, the backs of the sunflowers and the leaves. And the green in my plant is not a true green. It's a kind of grayish green. I'm thinking about my color wheel now, and the opposite of green on the color wheel is red. And the way to gray down green is to add just a tad bit of red. And I'm going to try that and see what happens. And the green I've started with is kind of a yellow green. I think that's too much red. Actually, no, it's kind of nice. I'm going to go with this green. Now I'm gonna hit the central portion of the flower, which is definitely a very dark brown, and I'm gonna mix my brown. I'm not using it from the tube, and I'm gonna use red-green combination. They are opposite each other on the color wheel. And when you mix the primary with its secondary opposite, you can make a very gorgeous brown. So I'm doing red with green, but the same holds true with orange and blue and yellow and violet.
Liz, may I just say thank you so much for reiterating the color wheel. It's incredibly helpful. So thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome. And it's kind of tough to remember. So unless you do it frequently, people tend to forget. And I'm noticing something, and I just noticed it by looking at Van Gogh's painting as well as looking back at the flower. I should have laid a yellow area in the center portion of the flower first. If you look really closely at your sunflower, there is a yellow base underneath those brown, hairy, sticky outy things in the middle of the flower. So I'm going to put a wash of yellow down first. I don't know if everyone can see that, but I have a feeling he did that as well.
So my sunflower has a hairy yellow.
Aha, so you can just ignore what I said entirely. Just go hairy yellow. Remember those people in my age bracket, there was that song, Call Me Mellow Yellow. I forget who the songwriter was.
Quite rightly.
Donovan.
Donovan, thank you.
Yeah.
I even almost got the tune right on it.
You nailed it, darling.
I'm just mad about saffron.
Oh, that's right.
What about me? Picture where I was the first time I heard it. And as per usual, for most of the songs of our generation, it makes absolutely no sense.
Well, they're not listening to the right music then.
Haha. That one scored big. I never understood why, but who knows? Okay. So for the hairy parts of the flower, I am going to use what's called a dry brush technique. Although my paper's pretty wet at the moment. Dry brush means I'm using now less water. See how I'm blotting my brush on the paper towel. And sometimes it's good to use a really old stiff brush to create that kind of hairy texture. And at this point, my colors are pretty dull, but that's okay because this is just the wash stage. As they dry, I can go back in and get thicker and darker or more vibrant. on the top part of the hairy section, I'm using my brush vertically so I can get longer lines of texture. On the side and the bottom, I'm using the top edge of my brush so that I get shorter dots. That creates foreshortening because at the bottom part here, I can only see the very tips of this part. Are they the pistils? Maybe that's the pistil part of the flower. So I'm just dabbing with the tip of the brush in this area. Get more of that tiny dotted tip. And in the central portion, it's really black. I love touching it. I hope you're okay with this summer color. So rather than using black, I'm going to mix red and green with blue to get my darkest shade in this painting. I have an ultramarine blue. This is a cerulean blue. Let's see what happens. Sorry about that. My new best friend, potential spam. All right, so my composition is set and I'm going to start adding details. And it's so warm today that it's almost entirely dry, my painting. It's almost miraculous. So now I'm switching from this large brush to a smaller brush with a bit of a point to the tip. Much better for detail work. How are we doing for time? We have about 10 minutes till sharing time. I hope Van Gogh has been a source of inspiration. Oh, people have been really fantastic in the chat box, putting in sources of information about Van Gogh. Terrific. That's exactly what the chat box is for. Thank you, everyone. If you have a minute, don't forget to check out the chat box, everyone. And Steve, I don't know if I mentioned this to you in the earlier class you are part of. If you want to be part of our email list, you can just put to the chat box, just to me, you can give me your email address and I'll put you in our email chain. I do send out a letter a few days before class, letting everyone know what the class will be about, so you can prep for it. But that's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, where to start first? Once you have your composition down, it becomes entirely a matter of choice where you want to bring your focus in first. I guess because it's the focal point of my piece, I'm gonna start working on defining the petals. And also because they're the lightest area of the piece, I guess that makes sense too. Again, I like to start with light first. Much easier to correct mistakes in the lighter shapes than it is in the darker. So the opposite of yellow on the color wheel is violet. I want to create shadow on the petals. I want to stay in that violet range. But I'm only going to add violet to a lot of yellow. I'm going to add the darker hue in small doses. I'm outlining and defining the petals. Inner petals are darker than the outer edge because of the way, probably just because of the way the light is hitting my flower. Might be different for you. a little bit on the petals. So now I'm switching to the central portion of the flower. Stamen pistil part with all the hairy thingies. Starting to make it darker. Knowing I can't paint every single little dot, just trying to capture the textural effect as best I can. Using more paint now, less water. Using that red-green combo, as I did earlier. It's a gorgeous brown. Close to the actual color, in fact, that I'm seeing. Bringing some of that red brown up into the petals as well, where I see the darkest shadow and detail to help define the petals more. Time. Oops, I let us work overtime. You guys keep working for a second. I'm going to check out who our artist is for next week. And then if folks want to share what you've been working on today, I hope so, we can do some of that. See a little bit of what I've created. There's a bit of glare today in my studio. That makes it better. Yeah, it's a little better. Oh, I never sent this.
Liz,
Yes.
your painting looks beautiful. Can you make it on the full screen?
Yeah.
So-
Sure, but I'll have to stop the share of the Van Gogh. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the same thing. Thank you for asking for that. It's so beautiful, Liz. Wow.
Thanks. Well, obviously it's nowhere near
Oh, wow,
done.
wow. Beautiful. I'm always amazed, and I don't know if I speak for everyone here, at what it is that you can come up with when I'm always like, yeah, I'll show mine, but it's not finished. Like, it's amazing. It blows my mind. So we love you, Liz.
Well, thanks, Lauren. I've been painting since I'm 7. I'm now 72, so I've had a bit of practice. This is why I prefer that you do not watch me. Excuse me. I don't want you to watch me because I think it's inhibiting. You're all at different stages. You have a completely different style than I have. And your work is going to look different from mine. So you should never, ever compare your work with other artists. You can get inspiration from other artists' work, but don't compare, please.
That's what I mean. You're always inspiring, is all. And amazing. Let's not forget amazing.
And you're amazing yourself. So let me look up who our artist is for next week. And is that the last week in August next week already? Scary.
Yes.
Terrifying. Where did the time go?
I don't know, but I'm going to write a letter to Mother Nature because I don't know where this summer went and I'm trying to brush through it.
Yes. It's been a challenging summer and it's gone quickly. So
Did you say brush through it or rush through it?
I like brush through it.
I love that. That's very cool. Thank you. We're all brushing through August.
we have such a fun artist for the final class. One of my favorites. And apologies to my more veteran artists. I have spoken about her before, but she bears repeating. Well, as did Van Gogh. We certainly talked about him before. We are going to look at the artwork. I'm putting her name in the chat box. Nikki de Saint-Phal. And I will send out an email with a short bio about her. She just had a solo show at PS1 in Manhattan, no longer alive, unfortunately, but one of the most joyous artists who ever lived. Although her work was, I think, completely underrated and undervalued because people thought it was childlike and silly, when in fact the reverse is true. It might have been childlike in appearance somewhat, but it was very deep and meaningful and beautiful. I so love Nikki de Saint-Phal, and she will be our artist of focus for the next and final Art at Home of August.
It's still in PS1. I went the second time last week.
Oh, it's still there. Okay, good. Wow. That's a long running show. I wonder if they're keeping it up longer because of COVID.
Maybe they don't have anything else. It's a fantastic exhibit.
And did you see the Raul de Nieves in the courtyard?
No.
Her
Her piece.
Her piece, and on the walls surrounding her piece is a painting by a Latinx artist, living artist, Raul de Nieves, who those of you who took the in-person, one of the last classes we had in person at the library, we looked at the work of Raul de Nieves. He was the artist who did that. They look like stained glass, but they are actually pieces cut out of, what's the name of that transparent colored plastic craft paper?
Cellophane,
Just the marvelous
cellophane.
cellophane. Thank you. Colored cellophane installation work. And he has, I think, 3 or 4 pieces hanging outside next to one of Nikki de Saint-Faust's fabulous nanas.
I couldn't tell you, I'm sorry.
It is there. It is. We saw it, Nomi.
We did? Okay.
Yeah. It's outside on the wall.
Great, right? I love him. And that leads me to briefly mention that in September and October, speaking of Latinx, we will be, excuse me, celebrating the work of great Latino and Latino American artists for Latin American History Month, which goes from mid-September to mid-October. So we're going to spend 2 months looking at all the fabulous Latinx artists from around the world, not just Latin American, but Picasso will be one of them. Frida Kahlo, whom you cannot ignore, will be one of them. Botero will be the first artist in October. So we're going to look at a lot of Latin American and Latin artists. All right, sharing. Lauren, you're number 1 on my list today. Oh, and your hand's already up.
I'd like to share. Mine's not finished either, but this is definitely a good base, and I think I might make it bigger.
Wait.
There's not enough definition, I don't feel.
Yeah, you need some detail, some more detail, particularly in the central part of the flower. It's a little blurry. Your colors are spectacular. I love
Thank you.
Love that you're testing out on the back of your hand. Look at the way, everybody, look at the way Lauren has made her background a living part of the painting. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want everyone to think about the background as almost like a character in the drama of your painting. Don't forget the background. You got your Klieg lights on and everything, girlfriend. You go. All right, Jane, you're next on my list to share.
All right, well, very quick. I'm just adding some detail into what I was working on yesterday. Adding some of the darker
This is
shadowy and, to create some definition.
You need some volume and thickness. So I'm thinking the branch here, you need to make that solid, more solid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for me, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
And how Gauguin had that thick, heavy branch that cut across.
Yeah, I have to get my Brave on and get a big crayon. Woohoo!
Go for it.
Thank you.
Margot, you're next on my queue. We're doing good. You're doing great, Jane. It's excellent.
I don't have anything to share today. I'm dealing with the back. I'm just happy to be here.
We get that. Everybody has a non-sharing day. Not to worry. Naomi, you're next. Lovely. Love it, love it, love it. Beautiful composition, fabulous color, little more definition. The things are kind of blending in to the background, so you need some edges, I think. You're welcome. Heather.
I'm just starting. It's only the bottom's done. I'm using that, this stuff, what is that? The non-drying clay, clay.
Play-Doh?
It's non-drying, like, it's not Model Magic, but it's that.
Yeah, I know what it is.
Fimo.
It's not Fimo because you don't,
know it
it doesn't, you don't
Oh, okay.
cook it, but
Crayola? Crayola?
it's whatever you gave me that one, gave us. Clay, something clay, play clay, or what is this?
Did you put it in the chat,
Modeling clay,
Heather? Oh,
modeling clay. It's modeling clay.
oh, okay. Is
I
that the
had done
brand?
something like that with it, like a while ago.
Love that.
So Van Gogh. Huh,
Yeah, made me think of Van Gogh, so I'm doing it with sunflowers now.
beautiful. You said it was modeling clay is the brand.
Yeah, it's a children's thing. It's
Oh,
blendable, gluten-free, long-lasting, non-hardening modeling clay.
so we can eat it.
You don't need to heat it. I'm just using my fingers and
Use salt, I'm just saying.
and mix it.
Yeah.
Make this stuff with flour, water, and more salt than flour and water.
And I'm mixing the primary colors, basically. That's all I have, so
It's great colors.
we'll see what happens.
I love it. Thank you.
So do I. Thank you.
Stephanie, you're next. Oh, it's after 12 o'clock, so yikes.
We're good. Let's make sure everyone shares. We started a little late anyway.
Okay.
It's gorgeous.
Maybe everybody could hold it up at a last minute gasp to share.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Oh, wow.
I like your
Beautiful.
It's
Wonderful,
beautiful.
Stephanie. Great detail.
Teresa, Steve, wow, Stephanie. Miss Liz.
Colors.
Oh my gosh. Bridget.
All right, I'm sorry.
Doris, beautiful.
Images up to the screen. I actually have to go.
Mhm.
Anyone who wants to share, please share right now. Oh my God, these are so
Oh,
Bestie.
oh, beautiful.
Oh, guys.
Yeah.
Wow. Steve, wow. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Lizzie. Oh,
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Wow.
Can't see anything.
Wow.
Send me JPEGs.
Okay.
Bye. Love you guys.
Bye.
Go
I
art.
have to go. Goodbye, folks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.